Incoming President-elect Marcos did mention this would probably be only a temporary solution, okay? But also the Department of Agriculture said a lot of the issues that Marcos will be inheriting are things outside of the country's control. You've got fuel prices, fertilizer prices as well, and the fact that we need to lower the import tariffs is also because of these issues na nagmamahal na yung just to produce. What can be done in the short term by the President-elect to target issues that might not even be under our control?
Well, we have to look for what we call in economics as value for money. Where do you put your scarce resources so that you can obtain the maximum benefit? At this present juncture, where we have a crisis, it has to be a combination of two things that we do. We should allow, importation of certain products because there's shortage of supply. Because of the lingering effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected the logistics of transporting food. That's one thing. So we need to be able to balance importation and local production. And as I said, focus on increasing productivity of the sector. That is a must. It is imperative that we increase the productivity, because if you look at the data for a 20-year, 22-year period, which we have tracked, the productivity is very low, about 1.2% or something like that, which is easily surpassed by our population growth rate of 1.4. So, and that's the main reason why we keep on importing, because our population growth rate just surpasses our agricultural productivity growth rate, because you have to remember that we're adding 2 million babies a year. So how can agriculture cope up with that, with the usual budget that is given every year?
Okay, so more budget.
So we need to think about closely on how to improve productivity.
Sir, a related question lang po, no? What about circumventing the effects of climate change? And with all of these issues that the sector has been hounded for, what can be done in the immediate term to counter these effects, or to at least be more preventive?
Climate change is so important because our calculation shows that we are losing about 20 to 25 billion pesos worth of goods due to damages and losses as an adverse effect of climate change. And therefore, we need to do some mitigation measures. We actually started doing that by encouraging early planting season for our rice farmers. That means you plant now before the destructive typhoons happen sometime in October, November, December. That's usually destructive. So we did it last year, and that's the reason why we have a relatively, it's a really an impressive growth rate, almost 20 million metric tons of palay, which is the highest for several years, more than 5 years.
Okay.
So those are the things that we can adapt. Early planting season. Secondly, the use of inorganic fertilizer. We have talked to the UP Los Baños using the so-called Bio-N. It's a nitrogen-fixing kind of thing. We need to massively apply that kind of technology, and that's the reason why increasing productivity needs infusion of technology now, including smart agriculture.
Now, of course, when we're talking about Marcos Jr. sitting as the next agriculture secretary, you have to bring up the point, a campaign promise, of course, of Marcos to bring down the price of rice to 20 pesos a kilo. But you mentioned earlier we should expect at least an average increase of 3 pesos and 13 centavos per kilogram. So how achievable is that 20 peso mark here?
It will take time before you can achieve that. And it will take so much money from the government to be able to achieve that through subsidy. And we already did our calculation. If you want to maintain it for a year, you need about 245 billion pesos.
Sorry, what's that again?
245.
245 billion. A simple arithmetic, sir. If it's 20, the current, kasi ganito yan eh, the rule of thumb is that if you want a kilo price, there has to be 2 kilos of palay because you have to dry, meal, wholesale transport, wholesale retail margin. So if the price of palay is 19 pesos, which is the NFA support price, that means in the retail market, it will become 38 pesos. So that means the price difference that you have to subsidize is 18 pesos, okay? per capita consumption of Filipino, average, Philippine Statistics Authority data, is 118 kilograms per person, okay? So you multiply that, 18 subsidy rate, 118 consumption, and then 110 million Filipinos. That adds up to about 245 billion. The budget of the Department of Agriculture, unfortunately, is only this year 85 billion.
Okay. And finally, Usec, before we let you go, just your thoughts on policy measures here. How long can we keep import tarifications low before it would affect our local industry and our local farmers? But, we need to keep the prices also lower and competitive. And how much more can we afford in terms of subsidies for these farmers and even fishermen?
I think there's no question that we need to subsidize we need to do social protections for our vulnerable farmers. Definitely, that's a responsibility of the state or the government. The only problem is that if we are going to protect, protection is okay, but it has to be time-bound. Like, for example, 7 years or 10 years. And then after that, you have to gradually dismantle protection, because if you don't, the chances are those people or industries or producers engaged in that will become lazy. They will not, install efficiency or competitive enhancement measures, which, by the way, is borne out by our history in the manufacturing sector. And even in the agricultural sector, for example, the sugar industry has been protected since the 1960s. It was the apex of success in the 60s. We are major importers. Now look, we are now importing sugar because of the long protection. We did not do time-bound, we did not do our homework of making those sectors efficient and competitive. Because it's much easier to raise tariffs rather than doing your work, delivering competitive enhancement measures to the sector. Kasi magtatrabaho ka talaga dyan but you just sign an EO or something in raising tariffs. It's a lazy man's job. But
Sir, so how long should subsidies be in place, sir?
I think it should be about, let's have a time bound of 5 years and then let's look at it and gradually lower tariffs. But right now, given the food crisis and everybody in the international market, I just came from the talks in the WTO, World Trade Organization, last week in Geneva. And everybody is talking about the global food insecurity, the threat, the coming crisis. We need to scoop up, we need to stockpile right now because of the crisis. So that means, for example, Vietnam has lowered the tariff for corn and China is doing the same thing just to be able to stockpile. Malilate na tayo. It's not the time right now because of the crisis situation.
Okay.
We need to respond based on the context.